Okie doke, cats. Here's the last one of the day that I'm going to do. Lesson 15.4, using measures of variability. That'll leave me with one to do. Let's take a look at key concepts. Remember, measures of variability, we would be talking about two things here. Really, range and interquartile range, which we'll prefix with IQR. So we take a look at this situation with doodles on last night's homework. You can see we have two classes, Class M and Class R, and they're basically showing you the range is 3 here, all right? And they're getting that range from saying, hey, 5 minus 2 will give me the range of 3. Over here, we see that the range is the biggest one's at 6, smallest one's at 1. So 6 minus 1, so that's why the range is 5. And so, in essence, what this is going to tell us is the spread, remember, of the data. And obviously, we're going to then use that spread in order to compare these two pieces of data. And so, obviously, if the spread is close, that means the variability is lower, and therefore means we have a more consistent situation. If we spread things out, like we do here in Class R a little bit more, then the spread is greater, the variability is higher, and it's less consistent. So if I gave you a class of tests, for example, and I said, hey, the test, we had a high score of 98, we had a low score of 20, then that would be in my book, that's a huge spread or a huge variability, all right? Whereas if we gave a test, and I see this probably more often in say, the honors class, where maybe the high score is a 98 and the low score might be like a 72, all right? Then the spread would not be nearly as good or as big, the variability would be lower, and therefore the kids would be more consistent in terms of their overall what happened in terms of the data, all right? Obviously this plays out in sports in terms of consistency. You obviously want players who are consistent so that you know what you're going to get from them day in and day out, basically. All right, okay, let's go ahead and go to part 1 then. And we'll try to roll through here if we have time. If we're under 15 minutes, I'll take a look up there and see if perhaps we want to show you some examples from the actual homework. Here's the first piece.
So, all of you in this room are what we call the indoor group. You all will stay in here and answer the mood questionnaire indoors. Get it? Great. Now, where is the outdoor group, I wonder? Oh, right. I'm guessing they are outdoors. Okay, I'm going out there to talk to that group for a minute, but I'll be right back to check on those questionnaires. Okay? Great.
Okay, so as you can see, what we've got here is they're going to rate your mood, and so we're looking at an outdoor group versus an indoor group. Okay, now again, these are kind of, I think with the bar graphs, which are called, they're just a little difficult to read. And so, we almost have to take a look at these and say, we're going to go from, let's say what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There would have been a 7th one right here, an 8th one right here, a 9th one, and a 10th one. And so I suppose you could argue, say, hey, that's 10 minus 0, which is a 10. The spread is 10. The range is 10. If we take a look at this one, you could argue 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And again, from a reading perspective, it's 8 minus 0, and that's going to be 8. Now, I warn you about this because the reason I did that, counting them individually like that, is because it surely seems like sometimes we get a situation where you're off by 1. And if you're off by 1, then you wouldn't have taken this into account. So just kind of, when you get these bar graphs, please double check them before you answer the question. And you can see, even in this particular situation, we didn't have anybody in this. We still have to go really from the biggest to the smallest in order to get the range. And so what does this tell us? This tells us that because this is a 10 is the range here and 8 is the range here, we would say that the people in the outdoor group have a wider range of moods, and so therefore they apparently going outdoors doesn't have, is basically a greater mood swing, I guess you would say, okay? And the people who are in the indoor group, their moods are perhaps not as big of a swing as the outdoor group would be. Take a look at the next situation where we got a researcher studying the effects of owning a cell phone. So this one you guys, I would think, could appreciate a little bit more. And they're talking about how it links in with the number of hours of sleep for each group. And so you can see here that if I look at the cell phones and I'd say, hey, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, and I suppose you could make the argument, hey, we could easily get that by saying 8 minus 4 and getting 4. And over here, we're at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And again, you could make the argument, hey, that's 10 minus 4. And I know it looks obvious. You could just say, well, hey, that one's at 10, that one's at 4, that one's at 8, that one's at 4. And I would have believed you, but I've seen some of these that just don't play out exactly like I think they should. What does this tell us? This tells you there's a wider range of hours of sleep if you're in the no cell phone group. It tells you, therefore, that the variability is greater. And it tells you that we have less consistency then in terms of hours of sleep if you're talking about the kids with no cell phone. Again, I would probably tend to disagree with this because my opinion is if you have a cell phone, then we're going to have that wider range is what I personally think, which obviously doesn't amount for much. So, all right, and again, just to verify what they are saying or what they might be looking for, let's take a look real quickly at what they said the answer is. And you can see that the numbers that they came up with are the same as ours. And so their inference is that the population that owns a cell phone sleeps more consistently in terms of the number of hours than the population that doesn't own the cell phone, okay, which is pretty much what we said that they said. That's what the data tells us. Like I said, I would tend to disagree with that. Take a look then, if you would please, at the next round, 15-4, and again, they're going to want us to read a dot plot, or a box and whisker plot. So they're asking us in this particular situation on part 2 about the interquartile range. Now, again, to read our interquartile range, think length of box. Again, I think we stated this at an earlier situation, but this basically would represent 25% of the people are in this category. 25, so it breaks it up into quartiles. 25% of the people are here. 25% of the people are in this situation, and then 25% of the people are in this situation. So we're breaking it up into groups of 4, or should I say 4 groups that each have the same amount of people, even though you look at the outdoor group and it looks like this has more people in it, and it really doesn't. They're just spread out more. So what we're going to find here is our IQR on this one could be found by looking at the length of the box. So length of the box appears to be about 2. On the indoor group, the length of the box, or the IQR, appears to be about 4. Okay, so 6 minus 2 on that one, and then 8 minus 6 on the previous one. What is this telling us? This is telling us that the indoor group is more consistent because the data is closer together. All right. And so if we're talking about how it affects people's moods in this particular situation, the indoor group has a more consistent mood than the outdoor group. All right. Okay. Erase that. Move on to my next problem. And again, we see another box and whisker plot. And again, it says we're looking at the effect of cell phone on the number of hours that people sleep. And so again, if we're looking at the IQR, and this one might be a little tougher to read, but if I look at this and say, all right, that's about 5, and that's about, well, if they're 1, 2, 3, so this would be quarters right here, 7 1/4, 7 1/4, 7 1/2, 7 3/4, and 8. So that means this one's about what, 7, I'd say 7 1/4. So this one is probably 7.25 minus 5. So that's going to be an IQR of 2.25. On the next one, we're looking at about what, 6.75, and this one's about 8. So we're looking at 8 minus 6.75, and that's about 1.25. Okay, Okay, and again, we know this, we know what we're looking at because it says we want the interquartile range. So we made an interquartile range calculation. We're comparing 2.25 to 1.25. And so what is this telling us? This is telling us that, hey, the number of hours slept in the cell phone group has a wider interquartile range, a bigger interquartile range. And so therefore, the people in the cell phone group sleep more inconsistently than the people in the no cell phone group, where the spread is only 1.25 hours. Okay, and again, just to verify what they say and what I say are kind of in alignment with each other, let's take a look at what they said their response was. Again, the numbers hold true. You can infer that the population that doesn't own a cell phone sleeps more consistently. Okay? All right, well, let's move on here. We've got this by themselves. Could you use the range and the IQR to determine which population sleeps more than the other? No, not really. I mean, it's basically a measure of variability. I think you'd be better off if you're looking for that kind of thing to go with an average or the median. All you're basically going to do is compare one group to another in terms of, the consistency of the situation. All right. So again, if given the choice to use range and IQR versus mean and median, I got to think that you would be wiser to use the mean and the median if you're looking for some data and trying to make some determinations about the data. We're going to skip this one, and we're going to go to this guy right here, a psychologist studying how the outdoors. So again, this is very similar to what we were already looking at. So I think I'm going to use this one, and then I'm going to jump ship. Actually, let's use this one because I think you guys are bigger on cell phones than on sleep, or on the previous one. So if I take a look at this and I say, hey, the cell phone group is in purple, and you can see that we could conclude. Let me see, does it tell us what we want? Does it tell us we want IQR or range? It doesn't really say. So if we looked at the IQR is wide here, okay, versus this one. And so we would say that based upon that, the no cell phone group sleeps more consistently, okay? If we looked at the range of numbers, then we would make the argument that, hey, the no cell phone group actually sleeps less consistently than that group. So you got to make sure, and the question becomes, hey, what do I use then? Do I use the IQR or do I use the range? And so their solution here is, 50% of the data. They're talking, you might have, and this is the problem with this, you might have a stray piece of data. So if the IQR is wider, so the hours slept varies more, we talked about that. Again, I personally don't think you could use the idea that this value seems unusually low and one of the values seems unusually high. So again, I think that makes it a difficult question. Let's go ahead and roll to an actual test question in, since we're under 15 minutes, or a test question, homework question, should I say. And again, with it being part 3, I know we're looking at number 5 and number 6 would be your primary problems that are going to eat that up. And so it says the following box plots show high temps in Fahrenheit. What do you conclude about the cities based on the IQR? So again, they're doing you, I think, a favor by saying, hey, let's look at the IQR. Well, the IQR here on city 1 looks to be 76 to 68. So that's 8. That means that 50%, remember, if this is 20, that the box is 50% of the population is in the box, okay? So the IQR here is 8. And the IQR over here is 74 to 78. So 78 minus 74 is only 4. Okay, so the IQR in City 2, what does this mean? The weather pattern in City 2 is more consistent because it has a smaller IQR. That's basically what they want you to come up with here. And so, boom, that's what we get. All right, move on to question 6. And this time they're going to force us to read a bar graph or a histogram. And they're going to ask us a very similar question. What do you conclude about the populations based upon the range? And once again, they're specifying what you're looking at, which is huge. So, and this is where you got to be a little bit leery. And again, I might be a little off on this, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it looks like we're going from what? Do you say 90 to 0? And say that the range there is 90? And then on this one, do you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 60 to 0? It's going to be 60. Okay, so what does this mean? People sample the ages who go to the library and who use the arcade. The library, a wide range of people go to the library. Arcade, obviously, I can't imagine too many of these people over the age of about, what, 30 going to an arcade, but whatever. So what do we talk about? Diverse means wide range, so the library has a more diverse group of ages than the arcade, and a wider range is in essence what that means, okay? All right, we'll close her up right there. We're at about 16:37. So you guys have a great day, and if you have any questions, again, feel free to email me and shoot me some specific questions. Have a good one.